Saying Goodbye by ImJustAnotherBrony.
Ha! Last one there's a sour apple.
Applejack called back cheerfully as she raced through the orchard, slowing occasionally so that the younger filly could catch up a little. Applebloom picked up her pace, her wide, curious eyes mesmerized by the beautiful scenery all around, as the colorful autumn leaves of the apple trees fluttered down gently in the breeze. She smiled and blushed as one landed on her nose, before shaking it off and continuing to chase after her sister, the package dangling over the older mare's shoulder, stealing her attention. Applejack came to a cantering stop at the edge of the tree line, and gazed out over the large clearing below, pointing a hoof towards their home with a shining smile. Her younger sister trotted up beside her idol, looking up with adoring eyes, before her attention drifted to the mysteriously plain package once again. Applejack laughed.
You just can't wait, can you?
She shifted her shoulders, allowing the package to fall to the ground before hoofing it over to her little sister.
Happy birthday, Applebloom.
With a joyful squeal, Applebloom snatched the package away, her eyes wide and gleaming as she pulled out a long red scarf with an embroidered green apple on one end. Her face lit up as she slung it around her neck and pulled it tight.
Thanks, sis.
They're calling for an extra cold winter this year. I want to make sure you're nice and warm.
Applejack said softly, a little out of breath from their run. Applebloom reached up to wrap her hooves around her sister's neck.
Thanks for looking out for me, sis. You're the best.
Returning the hug, Applejack felt a deep lump in her throat growing and falling into a knot in her stomach.
No need to thank me.
She patted her sister on the head.
Sit here for a while, will you?
The pair made themselves comfortable, laying across the golden-brown leaves as they gazed over the beautifully lit clearing towards their home. The sun was just beginning to reach the western horizon, casting its warm orange glow across the acre's beautiful hills.
You know, when you were still just a tadpole too young to talk, our mom used to bring me to this spot. She told me that she wouldn't be around to take care of us forever, and that when she was gone, I'd have to make sure you'd be well cared for. When we found out that Mom was dying, Big Mac couldn't take it. He stopped smiling. He stopped talking much. Mom knew he'd never be the same, but she knew I'd be able to make myself strong enough to keep you safe. She made me promise to raise you right. Make sure you were happy as could be. So I did. And I love you, Applebloom. Really do.
Applebloom cringed at the words, confusion and a vague sense of fear prickling in the back of her mind. She knew her mom had passed shortly after she was born, and that Applejack had always filled the role, but had never heard all the details of the situation.
I love you too, AJ.
She nuzzled her face into her sister's warmth, cutting out the nip from the cool autumn breeze on her nose.
I gotta tell you, I won't be around forever neither. This farm, Big Mac, Granny Smith, well, they're all gonna turn to you one day. If you ever feel weak or alone, just come back to this spot and catch your breath. Sometimes when it gets rough, I come here on my own. I swear I can still feel Mom in these here trees, looking down and tell me I'm doing just fine.
Applejack placed a hoof on her chest, a few tears welling up. Applebloom winced and squeezed her sister tighter.
Applebloom, you're growing up right. You're a smart kid and got a good heart. I know we ain't got much here on the farm, but never forget the most important thing. Even when it seems like you ain't got a lot, you always got your family.
She stood up and helped her younger sister to her hooves.
Now, let's get back before you catch a chill.
Applebloom brushed herself off, a few small leaves falling to the ground. She looked up at Applejack, who was still staring out over the clearing with sad eyes. The breeze blew through her mane and ruffled her coat. Applejack closed her eyes and tilted her head up, taking in all the familiar scents that her favorite part of the orchard had to offer.
It's gonna be a hard winter.
She smiled ruefully down at Applebloom, patting her gently on the head.
I can feel it.
Doing her best to ignore the grim words, Applebloom bumped her sister's chest with a hoof and smiled.
Come on. Want to race home?
The pair headed down into the clearing and cantered back home, playfully chasing one another and tumbling through the colorful falling leaves. Applebloom pranced through the frosty piles of brilliant white snow that covered the hills of Sweet Apple Acres, before suddenly ducking behind a tree.
I'm gonna get you.
A voice called from the other side of her cover, followed by a small barrage of snowballs. Applebloom laughed and ducked her head before lunging out into the open. Several cold projectiles of her own nestled in her scarf as she held one end of it with her teeth. Applejack was unarmed and held up her hooves as if to surrender, but Applebloom didn't intend to let her get off that easily. She began tossing snowballs left and right with her front hoof, some hitting her target and others missing by a long shot. Applejack laughed and lifted up a large chunk of snow, much to Applebloom's terror. The filly squeaked and turned, galloping for the farmhouse door, knowing that Granny Smith would have Applejack's neck if she made a mess on the floor. Laughing, Applebloom pushed through the screen door and quickly closed it behind herself. With a sigh of relief, she attempted to catch her breath and turned to watch for her sister's approach. Her bright smile shone, while her eyes scanned over the snowy field, searching for a sneak attack from Applejack. Any moment now she might spring out, laughing, with her hat on her head and snowballs ready to fire. The minutes ticked slowly by, and the filly's grin slipped gradually into a confused grimace as Applejack failed to appear. Applebloom gulped and headed back outside, wary of an ambush or sudden barrage of snowballs. She trudged through the snow, casting her gaze around.
Big sis?
She called out. The only reply was the crunching sound of her own hoofsteps.
Applejack!
She was hit with a sudden gust of icy wind, and the snow began to fall again, coming down heavily.
AJ, where you at?
Her eyes widened in fear, and she began to breathe quickly as she picked up her pace to a canter. Applebloom tugged her scarf a little tighter as she approached the place she had last seen her sister. Suddenly, she stopped, frozen, as she spotted a pile of snow larger than the others. Half buried inside of it, an orange mare lay very still, a small pool of blood forming at her mouth, and a round brown hat resting about a foot away, covered in the still falling snow.
Big sis, get up!
Applebloom galloped to Applejack's side and shoved her muzzle beneath her, but she didn't have the strength to lift her.
This ain't funny. Get up, will ya?
She pushed on her sister's chest with her front hooves, trying to rouse her. On the verge of panic, she turned and rushed back towards the farmhouse, yelling frantically as she ran.
Big Mac! Come quick! AJ's hurt!
The large red stallion perked up his ears and quickly trotted to the door to investigate.
What do you mean she's hurt?
Follow me! Quick!
Applebloom galloped faster than she ever had before as she led the way back to her fallen sister. Big Mac's eyes widened in shock as he spotted his sister lying in the snow, and he quickly stooped to hoist her onto his back.
Go tell Granny. I gotta get her to the emergency room, got it?
With tears pouring down her cheeks and snowflakes dotting her mane, Applebloom nodded and ran back as her older brother galloped down the snow-covered path to Ponyville. Big Mac pressed through the emergency room doors, shivering and panting desperately for breath. 2 orderlies promptly hurried to his side and lifted Applejack onto a wheeled bed, pushing her into an examination room. A white mare with a dull pink mane stepped up to help brush the large amounts of snow off the stallion.
Are you feeling all right, sir?
I'm fine. I just need to know what happened to my little sister.
His voice was soft despite the agonizing pain in his chest, partially caused by the icy air he had been breathing while galloping to the hospital, but more so as a result of the nearly overwhelming worry for his sister.
I assure you, we're already doing our best to take care of her. For now, I need you to tell me everything you know about the situation. Please, have a seat and try to answer as many of these questions as you can.
The nurse hoofed over a clipboard and quill, then directed him to a seat in the waiting room.
I need to see her. I need to know if she's still breathing.
Big Mac looked into the nurse's eyes, cracks beginning to appear in his strong emotional walls. Sympathy washing over her, Nurse Redheart placed a hoof on his shoulder and sighed.
She's in good hooves, I can assure you of that. Please, fill out the papers. The faster you do, the faster everything else can move along.
Blinking the tears out of his eyes, he looked down at the clipboard. There were dozens of boxes to tick, and questions to answer with seemingly useless information. One thing did catch his eye, however. Does any pony in the patient's family have a history of heart disease? With a pained sigh, he sat heavily and lifted the quill.
We've stabilized her breathing, and her heartbeat is there, but it's weak.
The nurse said, hoofing a clipboard to the doctor before moving out of the way.
She's just waking up now.
The brown stallion gripped the chart in his hooves, his expression dark as he looked it over.
Where am I?
Applejack cracked open her eyes and tried to lift her hooves, but her muscles betrayed her.
You're in the Ponyville Intensive Care Unit. There's been an incident.
The doctor explained, his tone careful.
I ain't got time for this. It ain't my time yet.
Applejack turned her neck and used all her willpower to make herself lean up.
Please, ma'am, don't move. I have some important news.
The doctor turned to the nurse, who nodded and exited the room.
Your heart is failing. You don't have very much time left. I'm sorry to have to put it this way, but when you fall asleep, you won't wake back up. It's important to know it's important that you use this time to say goodbye.
No, that ain't right, Doc.
Applejack took a deep, wheezing breath.
They said I still got 5 more years. At least 5.
With a pained sigh, he placed the clipboard down at the foot of the bed.
You were told to take it easy, Applejack. You've been working your weak heart twice as much as the average pony.
I can't just sit around when there's work to do. Doc, what are you saying?
Applejack looked into his eyes, her own starting to tear up as she began to grasp the reality of the situation.
I'm sorry, I truly am, but today is your last day. Your family is in the waiting room. I'll bring them in so you can say your goodbyes.
The doctor wiped at his eyes and exited the room. Applejack lay still, her frail heart thumping painfully in her chest. She strained and lifted her front leg, seeing a dozen wires and tubes attached to her.
This really it? Oh, Celestia, help me. They still need me. I can't go. Not yet.
Sis?
A shrill voice came from the doorway, followed by a small filly rushing to the mare's side.
Hey there, Applebloom.
Applejack reached down and hugged onto the filly as she climbed onto the bed.
We missed you.
Applebloom said, sniffling and laying her head on her sister's chest.
I missed you too.
Applejack hung on to her, tears still fresh in her eyes as she looked up at her older brother, who stood silently in the doorway.
Did they tell you?
Applejack asked quietly.
Yup.
His voice cracked as he spoke, and he dipped his chin, unable to quite meet his sister's eyes.
Tell us what?
Applebloom looked up with wide, worried eyes.
Oh, nothing. Hey, don't sick ponies get ice cream round here? Maybe I can sneak you some. What you think?
Applejack smiled and ran her hoof through her sister's mane.
Yum, that sounds great. I'm hungry. All the food here is gross.
Applebloom said, frowning.
Hey now, you best be grateful that these ponies were kind enough to offer you something to eat at all, you hear?
Applejack raised an eyebrow at her sibling.
Yeah, I am. I'm sorry.
That's alright. You just gotta be good, alright?
Applejack wrapped her hooves tighter around her sister, pulling her close.
I am being good.
Applejack felt her cheeks grow damp once again.
I know. I mean, you gotta be good all the time. You gotta be good in school and do your chores.
I will. Why are you crying?
Applebloom leaned back, the sight of her sister's brimming eyes enough to upset her as well.
I just love you, and I'm worried about you.
Aw, you ain't gotta worry about me, sis. You're the one who's sick. We're worried about you.
Applebloom closed her eyes and rested her cheek back against Applejack's orange chest.
You're right. Big man, do my friends know what's going on?
Applejack glanced over the top of her sister's head, weak hope in her voice.
Nope. I couldn't get to him. I was just barely able to get Applebloom down here, and that's because, well, I knew you'd need to see her. It's a real blizzard out there, and the Ponyville streets are closed.
Big Mac explained apologetically.
Ah,
She looked at the window.
I see.
It was dark outside, but the large snowdrifts and plentiful falling flakes were visible beneath the lights escaping the windows.
I could try.
Big Mac looked out the window as well, cringing a little as the fierce winds howled.
No, I couldn't ask you to, or my friends to put themselves in danger right now. I'll just have to write a letter. You think you could mind get me a quill and paper?
She broke an apologetic smile, not liking having to ask her brother for help.
Of course I can. Be right back.
He dipped his head and turned away, trotting out into the hallway. Applebloom had curled into a ball and was comfortably snuggled up against her sister. Applejack kissed her forehead and began to stroke her mane with a hoof.
I love you so much. I'm so sorry, Sugar Cube.
The filly shifted a little and let out a light snore, already beginning to dream.
What? Oh, I love you too, AJ.
She murmured, still sleeping.
Here you go, sis.
Applejack looked up as Big Mac returned. He dropped the writing materials gently onto her lap, then reached down carefully for a hug. Applejack returned the embrace, then kissed his cheek and leaned back.
I don't even know where to begin with this letter, but I just can't go without saying goodbye.
Big Mac cracked.
It ain't fair. First Mom and now you. Why is this happening to us?
The floor beneath his hooves was dotted with his tears.
Mom's passed for her.
Applejack.
Mom passed her condition on to me. You know that already.
Well, what do you expect me to do? What am I supposed to say? I'm losing my little sister. I can't lose you. Not you too.
Big Mac collapsed onto a chair beside the bed.
It ain't right.
Applejack looked down at her little sister, her eyes following the subtle movements of her chest.
Look, Big Mac. You got a day, one day to get it together. Applebloom's gonna be dependent on you starting tomorrow. You need to pony up and start coping. Wait, no, you ain't got time for this.
Big Mac nodded, keeping his eyes on the floor.
You think this is hard on you? Give me a break. I'm the one who's got to deal with knowing I'll never see the look on Applebloom's face when she gets her cutie mark. I'll never get to hear her laugh and play again. I'll never get to hear her about her first kiss or see her grow up. You know how that makes me feel? Do you know, Big Macintosh?
Applejack's lip quivered as she spoke, her voice cracked and broken.
Now, excuse me while I try to explain to my friends why I'm not around anymore.
Well, if you ain't the most...
What? If I ain't the most what?
Applejack glared back into his eyes, still stroking Applebloom's mane.
If I could trade places with you, I would. I'd love to trade. As a matter of fact, but I can't. Who's gonna be here, the one to explain to little Applebloom that her big sister ain't around no more? Who's gonna be the one getting questions thrown at him every which way? Questions that I don't want to answer or even think about.
Big Mac jerked a hoof at the dying mare.
Sure as heck ain't gonna be you.
Well, I guess we both got issues with you dying.
Applejack let out a huff and fell backwards, resting up against the bed frame as she began to write.
Does it hurt?
Big Mac asked, his mane covering his watery eyes.
It feels like my heart's trying to buck the ribs out of my chest.
Applejack kept writing without looking up.
Excuse me.
Nurse Redheart stood at the door.
It's after hours, and hospital policy doesn't allow visitors at this time. I'm sorry, but you and the other patients need their rest.
Now, wait just a second. You're telling me I can't have my family with me on my very last few hours of life?
Applejack glowered at the other mare, her chest heaving.
I'm very sorry. I really don't have a choice. This isn't a hospice, and, well, I can't just allow ponies to stay after hours. I'm terribly sorry.
The nurse's mouth twisted into an apologetic grimace, her ears drooping.
No, you can't.
Applejack lost her breath and began to cough, placing a hoof against her chest. Big Mac stood and was still for several moments, before moving to his sister's bedside.
Love you, AJ. You know I can't stay here no more. Our fussing's just keeping the other sick ponies up some anyhow. Now, I think you got a letter to write, so save your strength for that.
He turned to the nurse.
Listen, I'll go, but Applebloom's here and already asleep. She ain't bothering no pony at all. Please let her stay. I'm not asking for much. I just don't want AJ to be all alone through this.
The nurse let out a deep sigh and nodded, stepping out of the room. Big Mac slowly turned back to face his sister, looking her in the eye before giving her one last hug.
I love you too, big brother. Take care now, you hear?
Big Mac pulled away, turned, and left the room, slowly trotting down the silent hallway with no destination in mind. Applejack looked back at her letter with a heavy pit in her stomach, as she knew finding the right words would not be easy. Breathing out gently, she began to write. The clock ticked time away while Applebloom snored quietly against her sister's chest. Applejack sobbed once and wiped her tears away, setting the completed letter in an envelope off to one side. As she did so, the nurse and the doctor walked in.
Are you feeling alright? Do you want more painkillers?
The doctor checked her vitals, avoiding eye contact.
Nah, I'm good. Well, I don't want to end up falling asleep too soon, you know.
Applejack winked, forcing a smile. The doctor let out a deep breath and lowered his ears.
I understand. Please, let us know if there's anything you need. We'll be close by.
Will do.
Applejack nodded, beginning to stroke Applebloom's mane once again.
Oh, hey Doc,
Yes, what is it?
will you do me a favor?
Applejack looked down at her sister.
Promise me something.
Of course.
When I go, please make sure you get her out of here before she wakes up.
She choked up and placed a hoof over her failing heart.
Of course I will.
He rubbed at his eye with one hoof and cleared his throat.
Would you like a glass of water?
Applejack shook her head, dismissing them both, then rested her head back on the pillow. She felt weaker than ever as the strength continued to drain from her body. Her long blonde mane fell over her face, and she forced her eyes closed, then quickly opened them back up, afraid that she might have accidentally dozed off. Gusts of wind howled and rattled the window.
I sure hope Granny's downstairs, out of that drafty bedroom of hers.
Applejack coughed, her entire body aching as she did so. Applebloom stirred at the sudden movement and shifted in her sleep. Beep. 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 Her heart monitor continued to sound with its headache-inducing monotony. It forced its way into her thoughts as she stared up at the ceiling. Images of her entire life began to cycle through her mind, all of her favorite memories replaying themselves. Running through the autumn trees with Rainbow Dash, a sleepover at Twilight's library with Rarity, a high-speed pursuit through the desert. There had been so much excitement, and so many adventures. She had lived a good life. She didn't regret much. Her eyes began to feel heavy in the dark room, but she couldn't let herself close them. As she realized that she was experiencing her last moments, the room began to spin around her. She wrapped a hoof up in her sheets, hoping to stabilize her disorientation, but it only got worse. Beep. 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 Her heart monitor was sounding in greater intervals. She placed a hoof to her chest in an attempt to counter the growing pressure from within, but it only worsened the pain. Suddenly, a ray of beeps and alarms caught her attention. She rolled her head over to see that the green numbers had all turned red on the monitors. Two ponies appeared in her darkening vision, blurry but recognizable. Nurse Redheart lifted Applebloom carefully onto her back and carried her out of the room.
Thanks, Doc.
Applejack tried to mutter under her breath. Her vision grew darker until all she could see was a swirling mixture of blurs and shadows. The sounds of the machines and the words the doctor was saying all began to blend into what sounded like a distant, fading echo. Her ears ringing in deafening silence, she stared straight up through her dizziness and looked up at the sky. The sun was shining brightly, and golden autumn leaves rained down from the trees overhead. She could feel a cool breeze blowing through her coat, and the familiar scents and sounds from her favorite spot in the orchard filled her senses.
Mom?
Applejack closed her eyes. Applebloom sat at the tree line, overlooking the vast acres of the orchard. She could just make out the farmhouse in the distance from where she sat comfortably, wrapped snugly in her warm scarf. From her saddlebag, she drew out an old notebook. With a slight shake, a slightly wrinkled and folded letter fell from between its yellowing pages. The young mare opened the paper up and began to read.
To my dearest and closest friends, I wish there was a way for me to see each and every one of you right now, but on account of this blizzard, I just can't. So this letter is the best I can do. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. I know I ain't got much, but I won't let y'all go ahead and take anything you want. Just something to remember me by. The best I can do is let you know that I love y'all so much, and that you've really changed my life over the years. Thank you for being the best friends in the world. Twilight, I can imagine if you were here, you'd be panicking and trying to find some solution to save me. Heck, you'd probably write a letter to Celeste yourself, begging her for help. As much as I'd hate to see you so worried, I wish you were here, even at your worst. You always had something smart to say, and you know there's always something to be learned. You taught me a few valuable lessons that I'll never forget. I want to make sure that you get the chance you teach those same lessons to Applebloom. More importantly, I just want you to be a great friend like you always been. Don't let me going like this change you. You're the smart one, the sensible one, and our friend's gonna need your help to keep it together. I love you, Twi. Just know that I was thinking about you and that I'll always be in your heart. Rainbow Dash, I bet part of you is happy that you didn't have to be here. Well, I'll admit that I would have loved to have been able to hug you and tell you that I love you one last time. I don't think my heart could have taken it. You're a tough one when you gotta be. But I'm just imagining those walls coming down and it's making me tear up already. Be strong for our friends, okay? You can do it, even when they're feeling the most down. I know I can count on you to be there for them. You're gonna give Twice some racing lessons for next year's run in the leads, though. That beginner's got nothing on us. Make sure to tell Applebloom that I said to let you get the first pint of cider the night before the sale starts, okay? Love you, Dash. You know I do. You're my best friend. I wish we could have gotten some more time to spend together. No matter what happens or how you feel, never stop being you. The world needs more ponies like you. Oh, Rarity, I know. Oh, the last thing I said to you was I never wanted to see you again. Well, I'm regretting that now. Truth is that I wish you were here right with me right now. I could really use a sweet and gentle mare like you around right now. You might be pretty repulsed by this tacky hospital gown, though. Come on, a pastel green with hot pink dots? Who designs these things? I could use your help down here. Look, Rarity, I know we've had our differences, but those differences are what brought us so close together. I wouldn't have wanted to change a thing about you. You're perfect just the way you are, so forget what I said before. I'm glad to have had you in my life. You know, I'll never admit it if I wasn't where I was right now. When you dressed me up at Twi's that one time, I never felt prettier. At the very least, you made my world more beautiful just by being a part of it. You're a real gem, Rarity. Love you for it. Really miss you right now. Want you to know I love you, Sugar Q. Pinkie Pie. Don't think I forgot about you. Please don't cry, right? Keep on laughing, because that's what you do best. Hate to see you down. Those bright blue teary eyes break my heart more than anything else in the world. So do me a favor, remember that I'm watching over you. So no satty head faces, got it? I'm gonna need you to try real hard to keep smiling because of all our friends are gonna need extra help finding smiles of their own. I don't know about them, but nothing brightens up my day quite like your gorgeous smiles. You ever get being able to make ponies around you happy just by being your self? You're really something special, Pinky, and you mean the world to me. I know I could really use a smile right now, and thinking about you seems to be doing the trick. Love you, Pinky. Thank you for making the world a happier place. Fluttershy, I think you might be just the sweetest little thing Equestria's ever seen. I know our friends are gonna need a little tender love and care by the time you read this letter, and you're just the pony for the job. I know you can take care of them, wipe the tears, and let them know everything's gonna be alright. You five still have each other, and you gotta stick together. I haven't seen you in a while, Shy, and I really miss you. I've never felt a hug quite as soft and loving as yours, but just the thought of it's making me feel all nice and warm inside. You're a special kind of Pegasus, one of a kind. So make sure your kindness is always at the top of your heart. I love you, Fluttershy. This is goodbye. Wish I could see all you girls right now. So sorry that I can't. Just wish I had more time. Since there isn't, this is the best I can do. I'm imagining you're all here with me and remembering the great times we've had. Thank you for these memories and for giving me such a wonderful life. Love you all so much. Now make sure to give this to Applebloom when she's old enough. I don't want her to have to read it till she can understand it properly. Hey there, kiddo. I'm sorry I didn't tell you what was happening, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Well, I'm sure you know by now what took me is the same thing that took Mom. I didn't tell you because I knew you were going to be okay. I had you checked out 3 times. And each time they said you had a perfect heart. Wish I knew that this was going to happen, so I could have prepared for it. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. This means you're going to be the mayor of the farm now, and that means you're going to have a lot more responsibilities. You're older now, so I'm sure you can handle it. When things get hard, don't forget about that spot I told you about. Just take a seat and relax. I'll be right there with you, letting you know that it'll all be okay. I love you so much, Applebloom. You're my pride and joy. I devote my life to bringing you up right, and I know you'll continue to make me proud. Now go on, little one. You got chores to do.
Applebloom wiped her eyes and stuffed the notebook back into her bag.
Chores to do.
She snorted and gently shook her head, staring at the ground with a crooked smile.
It's been 3 years, AJ. 3 years. Mom's doing good, I guess, and Big Mac sent a letter last week from wherever he's staying over in Appaloosa, along with some bits. Should be coming up next weekend to help with this last bumper crop of apples down to Market Square. It actually seems pretty cheerful lately, believe it or not. Granny ain't looking too good, though. That old hip of hers finally gave out, so she's staying at the nursing home. She keeps her hooves full down there, always yelling and fussing over just about anything.
Applebloom chuckled ruefully and looked up at the bright blue sky.
I love you, sis, and I miss you so much. I need you now more than ever.
She closed her eyes and felt the cool breeze brush beneath her chin.
You know, you once said, even when it seems like you ain't got much, you always have family. Well, I guess that ain't really true now, is it? I'm all alone out here. Every day I haul in the apples and make myself dinner in that big empty house. My friends keep telling me to just leave it all behind and sell it, but I can't. I need it. I need the spot. I wish I could feel you there, the way you said you could feel Mom when you used to come out here.
Applebloom looked down as a tear ran down her cheek.
I just feel alone.
The wind blew into her ear, and for just a moment she could have sworn that she heard the voice of her older sister. The young mare's eyes shot open, and she snapped her head around, a smile already forming on her lips. Her heart raced, and her eyes darted about, searching.
AJ, was that you?
The gust came again, causing a small pile of leaves to dance, swirling up into the air. A mundane sensation washed over Applebloom as she stoically watched what might have seemed magical to some.
Just the wind, huh?
The young mare stood up, brushing some errant leaves from her coat. With a deep breath, she headed towards the slope and gazed out into the distance, her scarf blowing in the breeze.
Well, I best be getting back home. Well, I got chores to do. Right, sis?
The wind blew once again, brushing across her back and sending a chill up her spine. Applebloom smiled and closed her eyes. She remembered the laughter she had shared with her sister, and all the fun they used to have, chasing one another around that very spot. A pleasant feeling entered her heart. A warm, comforting sensation.
I'll race you home.
With those words, she darted down the trail. A few tears slipped out as she ran, but the thought of her sister slowly gaining on her pushed her to keep up her pace. With the wind at her back, she reached the farmhouse and made her way inside, leaving the door open behind herself. Collapsing on the couch and panting to catch her breath, she wore a soft and subtle smile. A smile that had been absent from her face for far too long. The end.